Recording in progress.
Morning, Chairperson and members, and morning, colleagues.
Morning,
colleagues on the platform. Morning.
Goeiemorgen, good morning.
We'll start the meeting in 3 minutes, colleagues. At exactly 9 o'clock, we'll be starting with our meeting. It's exactly 9 o'clock. Let me officially open the meeting and welcome all the colleagues on the platform. Mr. Nodada, I'm going to request that you flag the agenda and go straight to the apologies and indicate who is part of the meeting, as we have extended the invitation to provinces as well. A good morning to all of you, colleagues.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, honorable members and colleagues. Chairperson, with respect to apologies, we have a few apologies. The first apology that we have is that of the Minister of Finance. We also received an apology from the Deputy Minister of Finance, Deputy Minister Sarupan. We have an apology from Advocate Jenkins. He has another meeting that is starting now at 9 o'clock, but he will join the meeting after 10:30. We also received an indication from the Northern Cape that Honorable Kwinana, the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee of the Northern Cape, is going to join the meeting now at 9, but wishes to be excused at 10 o'clock. We also have an apology from Honorable Khadebe. Those are the few apologies, Chairperson. Chairperson, on the platform, there are few members that I recognized. Honorable Mosia, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee from Gauteng. I also recognized Honorable Killian from Northern Cape. I recognized Honorable Kaba from Gauteng. If maybe there are other members, maybe the chairperson might either invite them to introduce themselves, but those are the few honorable members that I recognized before the chairperson gave me the right to address the issue of apologies. Thank you, Chairperson. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Nodada. Honorable members of the Select Committee on Appropriations, honorable members from portfolio committees on finance in all 9 provinces, especially those in attendance, colleagues from the National Treasury and the support staff of the committee, let me welcome you in today's meeting. We gather to receive a briefing on the Special Appropriation Bill, which is Bill 22 of 2025, and the Conditional Grants Review and Reforms. Remember, colleagues, that a Special Appropriation Bill is a vital instrument for addressing unforeseen expenditures or revenue shortfalls, ensuring that the continuity of essential government services do take place. As outlined in the Constitution and Public Finance, colleagues, Public Finance Management Act, our committee plays a very important role in ensuring that these appropriations are justified, properly managed, and aligned with our national priorities. Regarding the Conditional Grants Review and Reforms, remember, colleagues, that these are the grants that are a significant component of our intergovernmental fiscal framework, aiming to support provinces and municipalities in delivering basic services. This is one of the reasons why we've seen it important to invite members from portfolio committees in provinces. However, colleagues, we must ensure that these funds that are allocated are utilized efficiently and effectively. Colleagues, today's briefing is going to provide us with insight into the National Treasury's proposals and recommendations on these matters. In our deliberations, colleagues, I know we'll be guided by the principles of transparency, accountability, and prudent fiscal management. We will be scrutinizing the bill and the conditional grant framework, seeking assurance that public resources are being utilized to achieve our strategic objectives. Colleagues, as we proceed to the briefing, I am not going to waste any time. I'm going to immediately hand over to DDG Khaorekwe to lead the presentation. And Mr. Nodada, I'm going to request that you give them the co-host right so that they can be able to control the slides on their side. Thank you very much. Over to you, Khaorekwe.
Good morning, Chair and honorable members. We're here with IGR to present the Conditional Grants Review and Public Finance will present on the Special Appropriation. Mashudu, are you one presenting? Do you need to
Yes, I'm here. I'm here, Ofani. I'm presenting, yeah. I will start sharing the screen. Yeah, sure.
All right. Sharp.
Good morning, honorable members and chairperson. My name is Mashudu Bija. I will be taking you through the presentation on the special appropriation bill. What I'm going to do now is just to share my screen. And you'll just indicate when you can see the screen.
We are able to see the presentation. Thanks, Mr. Mashudu.
Okay, no, thanks very much, Honorable Chair and members. As I said, my name is Mashudu Bija, so I've put the screen on slideshow. Hopefully you can see the first slide.
Mashudu, can you adjust the settings? So apologies,
Yes.
Chair.
Just put it into a full screen. It's a bit smaller.
Okay, it's fine. I will attempt to do that, Honorable Chair. On my side, it is on full screen, but let me just try to do this. Okay.
Through you, Chair, you can go to that settings on top there, Mashudu. You could have done it on the screen. Go to the display settings.
Okay.
And then you duplicate slide when you're on this part of, yeah.
I think this is better. You may proceed.
Okay. Is it on slide mode now? Okay.
It's perfect. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson and honorable members. So this slide really is going to provide the rationale why we are here and why we have decided to introduce a special appropriation bill related to the allocation that the Minister of Finance has authorized in terms of Section 16 of the PFMA. So Section 16 of the PFMA states that the Minister of Finance may authorize the use of funds from the National Revenue Fund to defray expenditure of an exceptional nature which is currently not provided for and which cannot, without serious prejudice to the public interest, be postponed to a future parliamentary appropriation. And the second bullet there just highlight that Section 16 of the PFMA further states that, especially in subsection 6, states that something authorized by the Minister of Finance must be included either in the next adjustment budgets for the financial year in which the expenditure is authorized or in other appropriation legislation. And I also underline that part, tabled in the National Assembly within 120 days of the minister authorizing the expenditure, whichever comes sooner. So the expenditure, this Section 16 expenditure, was authorized by the Minister of Finance on the 25th of June, 2025, and he authorized an expenditure of 754.5 million for withdrawal from the National Revenue Fund in response to the withdrawal of the PEPFAR donor funding, which is administered mainly by the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And Section 16.4 of the PFMA indicates that the amount authorized in terms of Section 16.1 of the PFMA must be reported to both Parliament and the Auditor General within 14 days of authorization. So immediately after the minister authorized this expenditure, we did send the details around this expenditure to both houses of Parliament to comply with Section 16.4 of the PFMA. And this special appropriation bill is introduced before Parliament to comply with the requirements of Section 16C, with Section 16.6 of the PFMA, as I've already indicated. Yeah, I'm going to move to the next slide. So the next slide really provides a background around the whole issue of PEPFAR withdrawal and what really necessitated the authorization of expenditure by the Minister of Finance in terms of Section 16 of the PFMA, which we use it in really exceptional cases. We don't normally invoke this section. In my experience within Treasury, this is the second time that we invoke Section 16 of the PFMA to allocate funding. So PEPFAR support over the years has amounted to about 400 million US dollars or 7 billion rand per annum in recent years. And this is channeled mainly through the USAID and CDC, which is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And substantial funding of around 2 billion rand a year has been provided for health research, mainly via the National Institute of Health. And within South Africa, this was mainly administered through the South African Medical Research Council. So USAID funding and National Institute of Health funding streams have already stopped. So this is something that most of us are aware of, whereas the CDC funding stream. So as I said, PEPFAR, it's channeled mainly through USAID and CDC. So the CDC funding for HIV prevention program only ended in September, just recently, whereas some aspect of the CDC fundings are still continuing. National Department of Health, after realizing this withdrawal of funding, approached the National Treasury formally on the 15th of May, requesting funding to close this gap. Thereafter, analysis was conducted within Treasury, and the Minister of Finance thereafter authorized an allocation of 754.5 million rand in terms of Section 16 of the PFMA for use in year immediately to address immediate needs, focusing on the USAID and CDC funded activities. So this amount is split mainly. The bulk of this funding is channeled to provinces, to provincial departments of health via the HIV/AIDS conditional grant. And also part of the HIV/AIDS health research, around 132 million rand was provided to the South African Medical Research Council, and 32 million rand was then allocated to the National Department of Health to support the centralized chronic medicine dispensing and distribution, CCMDD. They received around 17 million. And the pharmaceutical supply chain management program, then they received around 14 million. Chair, I wish to also indicate that these allocation to the National Department of Health were also to close the gap that was created by the PEPFAR withdrawal, because even within the National Department of Health, you had some form of capacity or personnel that were paid from donor funding, from PEPFAR donor funding. So we needed to also assist them in that regard. And I wish to indicate that the allocations to provinces and the CCMDD or within the National Department of Health are specifically and exclusively appropriated, which means that they can't be used for any other purpose except this purpose that is allocated for. This table here, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, is just to show the distribution that I've already shown you in the earlier slide, just to show the components of the 754.5 million allocation. As I said, the allocation to the South African Medical Research Council, it forms part of the core funding arrangement in which government will contribute around 400 million over the next 3 years, while the existing donors or partners will each contribute 100 million to continue some key HIV/AIDS research that has been ongoing or some clinical trials. So these funds are intended to sustain research projects, including continuation or ethical closure of some of the clinical trials, also to enable postgraduate students to complete their training, and support for early and mid-career scientists and maintenance of research infrastructure. Then for the allocation to the National Department of Health, so as I said, this allocation is to the CCMDD to provide for key personnel managing this program, which includes ARVs as well, and the pharmaceutical supply chain management capacity. This table here, Honorable Chair and Honorable Member, it provides the split of the 590.4 million, which has been allocated to provinces. This just provide a quick summary or split for each province. So this allocation, honorable members, it's ring-fenced. This allocation, honorable members, it's ring-fenced within the comprehensive HIV/AIDS component of the district health programs conditional grant. The provincial distribution of these funds was informed by the provincial continuity plans, which were submitted by the National Department of Health. As I've indicated in earlier slide, that upon this PEPFAR withdrawal, the National Department of Health engaged us about the impact of the PEPFAR withdrawal on the funding of key HIV/AIDS programs in provinces as well. So you will notice that in this slide, the Northern Cape did not receive any allocation, as its entire PEPFAR funding is administered through the CDC, which continued its support. So as I said, this funding was specifically to close the gap of the PEPFAR funding withdrawal by the US, specifically for those that affected the US aid. Each province, in terms of the requirements of this allocation, is required to develop a sustainability plan to guide the transition from PEPFAR funding and to ensure that expenditure aligns with these plans. And I can indicate, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, that we did receive some of these sustainability plans, and we have also engaged with provinces on how we should address this funding gap going forward to ensure some form of continuity of these programs. And furthermore, lastly, provinces are required to report monthly on expenditure and quarterly performance. So this is something that we'll continue to monitor from the National Treasury side to ensure that this money is utilized for the intended purpose. In conclusion, Honorable Chair, I just wish to reiterate that the Minister of Finance, again, has authorized 754.5 million in terms of Section 16, 1 of the PFMA on the 25th of June. And as required by Section 16 of the PFMA, this section requires that such expenditure should be included in an appropriation bill within 120 days after this authorization, and hence this special appropriation bill. In the past, ideally, this would have been included in the normal adjustment appropriation bill. But unfortunately this year, as you have seen, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, the tabling of the normal adjustment appropriation bill will happen on the 12th of November, which is way after the 120 days requirement that we should put this amount through. So hence the tabling of this special appropriation bill to comply with the 120 days requirement of Section 16(6) of the PFMA. Thanks very much, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mefaorekwe. Is that all from your side? We can go straight into the second presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Dr. Letsepa will do the presentation on conditional grants review and reforms. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to the members. Thanks for the opportunity. I am hoping you can see the presentation on slideshow now. Okay, so Honorable Chair and members, this presentation is going to provide you with the comprehensive work that we have done over the past 2 years. Quite importantly, I think as a start, is that behind this presentation, there are quite a number of documents that help inform it, some of which have been finalized, which we can share with the members. 3 of those, in fact, I think the report on managing conditional grant, just the synthesis of the whole work as well as the literature review. Those have been finalized, quite substantive in volume, but they are behind each of the grants. There is a briefing. So each of those briefings really speak to all the issues that have been identified through the process around each grant, the findings, as well as the recommendations. So for today, we're just going to focus a lot on the recommendations that are emanating from that body of work, which of course, as I go through each, I will also be identifying some of the issues that we've been trying to address through those recommendations. Without me wasting more time, Chair, this is the structure of the presentation, which is going to look at really where we are in the process and how we have conducted the review itself, some reflections in terms of the literature review, and then I'm going to zoom into the provincial and the local government reviews as well. At this point, I think I should just indicate to the honorable members that we've got quite a number of conditional grants in the system, about 55 of those, and a number of components as well within each of these grants. In terms of the milestones, really, so we just want the honorable members to note that we have done a comprehensive work, which started obviously with the analysis of the secondary data, where we did map all the catalogs of the grants, the funding flows were analyzed, and really just the IGR relationships. That was then followed by an extensive primary data collection process, which involved 225 individuals that were interviewed, of which 77 were from municipalities. And quite importantly, I think subsequent to that, once we had the synthesis report and having analyzed the data that we obtained from these, we also continued to consult. So the number that we had is drastically really just increased. I think for municipalities in the main, we have doubled the number of people that we have consulted because in various interactions where we're presenting the synthesis report, we've also been able to take into account additional inputs that were provided by municipalities and the other stakeholders that we have consulted, of course. And then obviously we then went to a process where we were now sharing the results of this consultation. We also continue to consider additional inputs. We also categorized the reforms, those that could be implemented and agreed on were implemented actually in the 2025 budget that was tabled by the minister on the in May. And where we are now, we are in the process of a continued sector consultations. I think in dealing with each of these recommendations, those that still have consultation outstanding, I will just be zooming in a short detail. On the literature review, honorable members, quite importantly, I think we found that our system is really consistent with many good practices around the world. In fact, ours is actually being used by other countries, as a model for a system that is well designed, which meant for us there were no pink unicorns, things that we could piggyback on and design our specific iterations on those. It is responding, of course, to Section 214 of the Constitution, and also just the issues around the grant design and principles were also analyzed and checked. And quite importantly is that the number of grants we have in the system are peculiar to what to us. There are also a number of countries as well that also struggle with a lot of conditional grants, but in those countries, I think we found that actually it is one ministry then that gets to manage those, meaning that capacity to implement is built around that one institution to then disperse the funds. What was then quite important for us in the process is that we need to ensure that there is a balanced approach, that the system is able to respond to issues around the simplicity of the system, ensuring that it's properly understood, but also the complexity of having grants respond to particular needs. And of course, what was quite clear throughout the process was that there is no alterations that we can make to the system itself that would ever compensate for lack of competence or capacity, as well as the poor governance that we sometimes see around these grants. So it is important to note that there are some of the issues that the conditional grant system on its own cannot address, which have to be addressed elsewhere in the system. I think these are deliberated on currently in terms of the white paper review, as well as the local government fiscal framework review where applicable. And also we were just cautioned in terms of how we then look at conditional grants, that conditional grants are a part of a system, so they shouldn't be seen as a separate system. So there is really an integration that needs to be taking place around how then we look at the purpose of each grant, the planning around the budgeting management, as well as the M&E processes that exist, and how these then interface with the equitable share, both for the provincial as well as the local government fiscal framework. Just a brief on some of the observations. In the local space, for instance, 96% of the grants there are in the built environment space, meaning that if we are able to address the issues in built environment, would have addressed a number of problems that we have in the system. Also, the review also advocates quite a lot for the use of incentives, but also realizing that we need to learn from the incentives that we currently have in the system that haven't really worked so well, and also cautious of the approach we have had in the past, where once a grant has been introduced, it then becomes hard to discontinue it down the line. The issue of the proliferation of the grants as well, and the complexity that comes with the planning and reporting requirements, and how those affect the different municipalities was something that also was observed throughout the process, and how we really have over the years, with the best intentions that we've had, moved away from some of the original principles around these conditional grants. An example is on the supplementary grants, which have over the years become more directive, meaning they have moved from being the Schedule 4 grants to more Schedule 5 grants, not by intention, but also just looking at issues of how to tighten controls over the years as well. So really some emerging cross-cutting issues around these grants. Obviously, the issue of capacity constraints across the three spheres of government came out quite strongly, that we do need to build capacity at those institutions that are managing these grants, but also the spending agencies, be it the provinces or municipalities. There's also a need to build a capacity there as well. There's also clear, uncoordinated and misaligned conditional grants. So here, a lot of inputs we received around, for instance, in the human settlement space, where there is top structure without the bulk that will service those top structures, then rendering the whole system ineffective in a way. So we do need to then try and improve how we then manage the conditional grants in a manner that even at the planning level, there is alignment that then cascade to the implementation level as well. Also, grant expenditure also has been in areas where it has been poor, it has been reported as being poor, but where it also has been good, it has not been associated with improved service delivery, meaning there are a lot of wastages in the system that also needs to be captured. But also there are wider intergovernmental fiscal system issues around the weak financial management, corruption as we know it, really, and the issues that also are emerging quite strongly are on the ambiguity in terms of the functional assignment amongst the three spheres of government. And we're seeing a lot of this when it comes to indirect grants, crippling into the system as well, confusing some of the functional alignment that exists. The two slides, honorable members, are really just giving you a snapshot of how we can categorize the reforms emanating from this work. So starting with the provincial side, there is reforms to rationalize the conditional grants. So this is seen in terms of the agriculture grants where we're merging, and then education and transport, as well as where we then try to discontinue some of those grants as grants, which actually have been ineffective operating as grant. But there's also grants which we are recommending that should be incorporated into the provincial equitable share, remembering that conditional grants aren't meant to be a permanent system in the main. So at some point, we need to then be able to then phase them into the relevant equitable shares. But also, I think the issue of improved effectiveness of the grant system is the one that we then speak to quite in detail in terms of how then do we improve that, bring in some incentives, but also how then do we address some of the duplications and the formula, is it responsive to the current realities on the ground around these. In the local government space as well, it's about improving the effectiveness of the grants, but also how then we start to rationalize on these. As you can see, we're not recommending any of the grants to be phased into the local government equitable share due to some of the challenges that we have around the equitable share, but also because we had started a process of reviewing the local government fiscal framework, which includes the local government equitable share as well. Just a deep dive into the kind of reforms that have been proposed in the agriculture space as well. We have recommended that we merge the CASP, which is the Ilima Litsima, and then where necessary, then incorporate both deliverables from these grants into one. So this will be implemented into this budget. It was well canvassed and communicated across the agriculture sector, and there was buy-in on how to move this. And the issue here we're trying to address, honorable members, has been a persistent underperformance across the two grants, but also where Ilima Litsima deliverables found themselves being delivered under the CASP, meaning now we're just addressing that issue by consolidating these two grants, but also improving how I think the issue in the main there is about procurement and how we then support emerging farmers in the main. Other issues are also just misalignment around reporting. So the sector has had, I think, 2 engagements where we're also invited to be part of, where it was ironing some of these issues so that in the new implementation that these things could emerge in a better reformed way. In the education space, there's the merger of the education infrastructure grant as well as the backlogs grant. So this is going to be effected in this financial year, where in 26-27 would then be the last year where we have the schools backlog grant as a standalone grant. And this, in the main, honorable members, is really just to ensure that the National Department is able to play its meaningful role in terms of supporting provinces. So the school backlogs grant is a grant that was delivered by the National Department to try and accelerate some of the deliverables that we needed in the sector, but these will then still be done by the provinces and really the national providing that needed support there. There's also a reform here around how then do we look at the incentive of the education infrastructure grant. So there's a review of that is currently underway, which is also going to be consulted on so that we can have an improved incentive to improve performance there as well. In the health sector, honorable members, I think here there are quite a number of issues around the pending NHI implementation. So there are no major changes that have been proposed in the health grants as a result of that. But quite importantly is the low-hanging fruits that have been identified here, especially around the duplication that exists in the health facility revite grant, as well as the facilities component within the NHI indirect grant as well. How then do we rationalize those two so that we can have better outcomes in that space? Quite importantly also is a clear formula for allocations in terms of the health facility revite grant. Also just having the norms and standards for health facilities infrastructure. So also here the recommendation is a redesign of the incentive, which is also being endorsed and is currently being looked at and reviewed. There are a number of issues, honorable members, around human settlements, whether we're delivering on the houses in the manner that we have envisaged. There's an issue around how the policy is translated into implementation. But quite importantly, I think I've spoken around the disconnect in the planning and how the grants also, are being utilized. So this department manages the Human Settlement Development Grant and then also at the moment manages the Urban Settlement Grant, which is for the metropolitan municipalities. But we do see there, even with the grants that are managed by the same institution, that there are sometimes those tussles and unclear implementation, I think, mechanisms that aren't working as well. And as a result, while there's a need to relook, at our model for human settlement delivery following the white paper on human settlements. But there's also a need to relook at our outputs and how those really can be measured and how then we can facilitate that there be a clear planning and budgeting that speaks to each other, but also how then do we start to look at the formula that addresses some of these and the conditions then that are necessary to ensure that we're able to deal with these issues. And obviously the issue of informal settlement is one that is currently also occupying the department quite a lot. So in the human settlement space, honorable members, we have two other grants. The informal settlement upgrading grant is for the provinces that are doing some part in assisting the municipalities where there has been poor ability to deliver. So that informal settlement is then provided to the province to then assist in that. So there is also just a review of the responsibilities of the provincial departments in this informal settlement upgrading space, because in reality informal settlement is a local government function, and then it would be wise that capacity actually be built at the level where the delivery should be taking place. In the space of the public works and infrastructure, specifically looking at the EPWP, the recommendation was to merge the two grants that existed there, and the recommendation was adopted and actually implemented in the 2025 budget, where we saw the merger of the two grants there, but also there is work currently underway that is led by the Presidency and National Treasury that is looking at the whole public employment programs. So that review will then inform further changes that can be made to this grant as well. In terms of community libraries grant, there is an incorporation of the libraries grant into the provincial equitable share, and then this is going to be done in a phased manner because there's a portion for COE, which is for cost of employees, but also there is the capital portion, which is quite smaller, as the department was also just easing down and building new libraries, because the big issue also becomes how then do you operationalize those libraries as well. So that work is underway, and the implementation will start in this 2026 budget as well. In terms of the mass participation, sport development grant. So this is the grant that from the review, it emerged that it was never actually meant to be a conditional grant in the first place, because sport is an exclusive provincial function. So we're also looking at how then to, in a responsible manner, phase that into the provincial equitable share. Of course, honorable members, the big issues around all these issues and recommendations, especially when we require buy-in from the sectors and especially those that are managing these grants now, is always about, how then, these services get to be prioritized in the provincial and the local spaces. So there's a big issue that we still need to deal with there between ourselves and the Department of Arts, Sports and Culture as it relates to how we take forward that particular recommendation. In the public transport space, honorable members, I think everyone would have an appreciation of the state of our roads. So the issue of the state of the roads, but vis-a-vis the historic underspending on the provincial road maintenance, just really speaks to a lot of inefficiencies that need to be improved in the system. And there's a dedicated work that is looking at this, and there's a recommendation that has been made that we need a deep dive into this issue, because we cannot phase this conditional grant into the provincial equitable share, because we do need to prioritize how those roads are being maintained. So that spending review is something that is coming up and that will then be implemented in the immediate future as well. There are also some changes in terms of the public transport operations grant, which is really just how then to improve the formula allocation, how then to revise the performance indicators for effectiveness in that space as well. But the long-term view from the review is that we should look at how then we start to build the capacity of local government to be able to undertake the bus operating contracting function. So work is underway there. Our city support program has been assisting the department in as far as that is concerned. And of course, the long-term view is then to devolve the function, or they assign the function to municipalities so that they are able to do this bus, as currently there are, issues of overlap between the public transport network grant, which is a grant for municipalities, and this grant as well. In terms of the local government proposed reforms, honorable members, obviously for the longest time now, we have had a base allocation in the MIC, which is 5 million. And that in evident means every municipality that has a function around or that is getting MIC funds would start with the base of 5 million, which was appropriate at the time, but we think it hasn't really kept up with inflation over the years. So we want to increase that, which will also increase the ability of the municipalities then to do more in terms of with that base allocation, even before we factor in the kind of functions that each municipality is doing and so forth. And also there is a need to start looking at how then to introduce the performance incentives within the MIC. So honorable members, MIC is a general purpose grant, meaning that it's not tied to any of the incentives that exist, and it's also limited in terms of the conditions that are applicable to it in terms of how it can be used. From the formula perspective, we do take into account and make suggestions in terms of how much of it should be spent elsewhere, but municipalities and TCOC remain a key in terms of how then that is being utilized. It's linked to the IDPs of each municipality in terms of the projects that they get to deal with. But on our side, we also feel that with the recent data that is coming from the census, it's about time also that we update the backlogs data that is used there, and also just look at whether there are any other changes that need to be made in that space as well. So these have been, I think, deliberated with the department, and these buy-in. It's a matter of how then do we start to phase those. The Integrated Urban Development Grant is one of the grants that was starting to respond to the spatial issues, and also realizing that there are municipalities that are facing similar issues to the metros, but they're not as big as the metros. So this was for our secondary cities, but it was also about how then to start to incentivize good performance. So having a stable administration in terms of the limited number of vacancies at top level, you spending as a municipality spending more on your maintenance and so forth, and your audit outcomes as well would then necessitate you to get an incentive from this grant. So we want to review the incentive in terms of its applicability, because we're seeing that more and more the municipalities are struggling to meet that, but also how flexible can we be in terms of how that incentive is being used. We also want to incentivize because this remains an infrastructure grant, but also maintenance becomes a big part of it. So we also want the department to consider how we then relax the need to spend the incentive on infrastructure so that we can also really drive the issue of maintenance. Of course, the issue of data around maintenance remains a big one. So in the disaster grants, also it's about developing a two-pronged strategy where we look at mitigation strategies and disaster preparedness, and also how we can institutionalize and the readiness in terms of the preparedness across the other grants as well. So there is a really a clear signal that we're sending there to say climate change should be addressed from the grant system, and we shouldn't be expecting new pots of money to then be able to deal with those issues. In the 2025 budget, honorable members, we discontinued the Municipal Systems Improvement Grant. It has moved into the baseline of the Department of Cooperative Governance. Apologies. And then in the electricity space, there are a number of grants there, honorable members, some not functioning optimally. So the energy efficiency and demand side management grant is one of those grants that are quite or meant to be quite progressive in nature, as they were helping us deal with the climate related challenges and how we're able to meet our carbon emission imperatives there. But over the years, how this grant has been implemented, it also just, I think the difficulty with having the MIC as a general purpose grant and then this specific grant also is also how then there are overlaps. So much of what is done here is also done in the so there is a need, of course, to then relook at this. So we are matching this grant with the National Early Electrification, which is the INEP grant. So it's going to be a small component within that, because we also trust that the system still requires that we deal with the issues of energy efficiency from the demand side, but also marrying this with INEP, which is also on the supply side as well, helps us to reach the balance there. So there's a buy-in on this reform from the Department of Electricity and Energy, and this is going to be implemented in the 2026 budget. But there's also a long-term view in terms of how then we also merge this INEP grant for municipalities with the smart meters grant currently being managed by the Treasury. So currently the Treasury is focusing on those municipalities that have in the debt relief program, and once we deal with those, we'll be opening this grant up, to all the municipalities. Hence, it makes sense to then merge it with the INEP grant so that we can also create some components within the INEP that will be dealing with the smart meters. But for now, we've amended the INEP grant to also look at alternative energy sources and funding those as well. And the smart meters in the new rollout is also being catered for. It's just that we need to start back at the ones that we already have in terms of the conventional systems that we're using in that space. And then, honorable members, in terms of human settlements again, obviously there is the grant for the metros, which is the Urban Settlement Development Grant. So that needs to be redesigned, and honorable members have heard us before when we presented around the metro trading services reform. So it is about moving that part of the metro trading services that is within the USDG, moving it into the National Treasury so that it can then be merged with the reform that the Treasury is driving in that space. But to top up that, there is also the Neighborhood Development Partnership Grant, which was going to the metros, and also the project preparation grant for the metros. Those are being merged together. So this, honorable members, is in line with the long-term view of how we finance our metropolitan municipalities, where we've always envisaged that due to the capacity that is there, we need to provide one grant that addresses all the kind of issues. So moving away from the many grants that are necessary in other municipalities that are outside of the metros. So this is progressively getting us into that space as well. There are a number of other reforms, honorable members, within the National Treasury grant. So National Treasury is managing also a number of grants around the local government financial management. One of the grants there is currently being redesigned with other support programs within National Treasury to ensure that there's a strategy, consolidated strategy in terms of how government responds to financial management issues in local government, because the AG findings are showing a damning results that are being seen there. But also there is the closing down of the infrastructure skills development grant. So this is within the Treasury. However, there are a number of other programs of similar value in terms of what they bring that are being done by other spending agencies as well. So it is how then we start to shift this grant to any of those government programs that are more efficient in how they deliver this mandate as well. It's also about how then do we start to merge the project preparation as well as the NDPG, neighborhood development grant part for the non-metros now into the one, and then how do we deal with that going forward? So the 2025 budget has actually seen an implementation of that, but going forward, the 2026 budget is now going to phase that particular grant out of the system as well. Obviously, the honorable members know about the new grant and the plans there to scale up investment in terms of the metro trading services reform there. Again, honorable members, these reforms in EPWP will also depend a lot in terms of the review that is being done of all the public employment programs, which is what the local government EPWP recommendations that are emanating from this review are being taken. This is a sad one for us, honorable members. The public transport network grant. It's one of those grants that really, when it started, I think we're all excited about what it could help us achieve. But what we've seen actually in terms of how it is being really implemented, it is really giving us less back for the money. So there's a complete need to just relook at the whole grant as well in terms of how it has been conceptualized, how we can then start, to channel it in the right areas as well, how we can revise the methodology that informs the allocation, but also how we can then influence, those plans that the municipalities come up with that get to be funded and strengthen oversight. So we have started in the 2025 budget by augmenting the incentive component in the formula. So other reforms are going to be done in this budget, but also I think quite importantly, the issue is that, we do need to reevaluate the efficacy of this grant in the context of the broader public transport provision as well. And then lastly, on the transport stuff, there is also the rural roads asset management system. So this grant funds really, the systems within that space. So here the recommendation is that we must match the roads component of the MIG with this grant to form a new grant, or to be part of the MIG, because there's still a need for a system that helps us identify where there should be an investment, but also there is a need for dedicated support that is provided to the roads given the state of roads. So what is now outstanding in this is a clear direction from the Department of Cooperative Governance and the Department of Transport in terms of whether we're moving for the MIC, matching this rural roads asset management grant within the MIC, or we create a separate conditional grant that actually deals with roads, which is also going to have this component of dealing with the systems within it as well. Also, a number of issues, honorable members, around the water sector. So there are a number of grants in the system that fund water, and as a result, there are overlaps that have been picked up through this review around some of the projects that are funded from the MIC, but also from the Regional Bulk Infrastructure Grant, as well as the Water Services Infrastructure Grant. So it's about how then do we eliminate those inefficiencies. In the main, honorable members, I think the recommendation here is similar to that of transport, that we need to be clear on how we fund water and sanitation infrastructure. Either we move the portion within the MIC that deals with water and sanitation to the grants that the Department of Water and Sanitation is managing for better management, but also to ensure that there's a clear line of sight in terms of which projects can be funded at what time, so that we eliminate these overlaps that exist, or we move the grants that are managed by the water and sanitation to the MIC, so that we do the same there with the Department also of Water and Sanitation, of course, retaining much of a bigger role in terms of influencing the process there. So that discussion and final recommendation is outstanding. So there's a discussion that needs to take place between the two departments to then finalize how we move forward then. There's also a need to review the co-funding obligations that are within the Regional Bulk Infrastructure Grant. So many municipalities are failing, but also the department is also lagging behind in terms of having a clearer methodology of how to look at those and how to assist and how to ensure that those that can co-fund projects actually do so. A number of projects that are meant for co-funding are actually not completed because the state would fund its part, and then the municipality would then fail to bring its part in the system as well. So honorable members, this really is about how then we start to clean the system in a manner that helps us for these grants to play a meaningful way, but also how we can start to bring the private sector resources and expertise as well, how we really look at the PPPs and how they can be assisting in the water space as well, as there's a scope there that exists for the sharing of risk, especially on these large-scale projects as well. The presentation, honorable members, ends at this point. So the next two slides just show you how the system is meant to look post the implementation of all the grant proposals that have been put forward, but also more importantly, honorable members, for you to notice that there continues being, these engagements with various sectors on how we can refine and in a responsible way start to phase in these recommendations in the system. Thank you very much, KDG, and thanks to the chair and the honorable members as well.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, is it all, Makaurekwe? Any word from you?
Yes, Chair, that's all from us. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both Dr. Pizza and Dr. Pakis and the whole team from the National Treasury for the two presentations. I would like to note the hands of members that would like to engage the presentations. On the screen, I see the hand of Honorable Siwisa, Honorable Brits, Honorable Swartz, Honorable Ndlovu, Honorable Numalo, Honorable Majola. I should also indicate that the second presentation is also relevant for portfolio committees in provinces to can engage on. So you are more than welcome to participate. If you have anything that you would want to raise or a question to the National Treasury, you'll be allowed to do so. Honorable Ryder, you'll be the last. Honorable Siwisa.
No, thank you, Chair. Greetings, Chair. Let's welcome the presentation from the National Treasury. Chair, I hope that I'm audible. It's not like yesterday. I tried to find another place to sit.
No, you are very clear.
Okay, thanks, Chairperson. Chair, my question will be on the special appropriations on the health that pertains to health. Treasury highlights that it will expect is mandating provinces to submit monthly reports and also to submit quarterly reports on the expenditure. But Chair, we should not forget the experiences that we got of corruption during the COVID times. What measures will the Treasury put in place to ensure that money is spent where it's needed, and what consequence management will be put in place for provinces that are not complying by submitting monthly reports and also their quarterly reports? What is Treasury going to do? What is the consequence management? And then, Chair, despite the special appropriation being done, specifically because of the withdrawal of funds by the USAID, with specific to the impact that is going to have if we don't have money to deal with our HIV and AIDS cases in most instances. What is the plan to ensure that there is manpower? As we know, the Chairperson, that in South Africa, we do have a shortage of doctors and nurses, and we can't speak about resources without speaking about manpower. We can take the money out, but if there's no administrators of the medication, then it means that that's going to be a problem. So I want to check with National Treasury. It's a pity that the Minister of Finance is not here. How are they going to deal and assist the Department of Health pertaining the manpower that is needed, especially when it comes to administering all of these medications? I will pause there for now, Chairperson. This is just a follow-up from the questions that I think I posed to the PBO last week when they came to brief us as to what the special appropriation entails. So I just need clarity on that one, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Siwisa. Honorable Brits.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I'm attempting to switch on my video. I don't know if, no, I'm still not in the room. I'm going to switch off.
You're still behind the building, Honorable Brits.
Yes, I will try to come out of hiding. Madam Chair, I'm going to start with the Special Appropriations Bill. We have a number of questions and we have not received answers. Now, first of all, the withdrawal of funding for HIV and AIDS programs was anticipated for several years now. Why did National Treasury not plan for this fiscal risk earlier within the medium-term expenditure framework to avoid reliance on emergency legislation? And secondly, what specific criteria were used to determine that this situation meets the threshold of urgency? And why could the allocation not wait for the adjustments appropriation process? And then coming back to a question that the Honourable Siwisa also asked, and that is our concern regarding emergency allocations, especially when we bear in mind what happened to COVID-19 allocations from emergency funds. We are very, very concerned about consequence management. What consequence management measures will be enforced if provinces fail to comply with reporting obligations or divert funds away from their intended purpose on the same level, extent, and scale that we've seen with COVID-19 emergency funds? Coming to the proposed grants, I must place on record that I'm uneasy with the grant reforms as proposed. As it stands, we are already faced with underspending, undercollection of revenue, municipalities without capacity, especially financial capacity, fiscal dumping, misappropriation, unauthorized, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. And as we've heard last week, this is in the total amount of 150 billion rand in Q3 of 2024-2025 already. Now, the NCOP went on oversight last year and compiled a comprehensive report on unfinished projects in all provinces. Now, as it stands, there is an all-over incapacity to effectively spend the funds that are available. It was also mentioned that capacity must be built. That was in the presentation this morning. Now, this is troublesome. Provinces and municipalities already struggle with capacity constraints, especially in financial management and technical planning. Now, how does National Treasury want to build capacity in the local government sphere? I think details are required. Most questions that arise from this presentation evolves around details. There's a lack of detail, and we as a committee haven't heard sufficient detail of how National Treasury is intending to implement these reforms. I also would like to know, how will National Treasury ensure that rationalization does not disadvantage poor and rural areas with low administrative capacity? A general statement, as we've heard in the presentation this morning, does not put these concerns at rest. Furthermore, Madam Chair, what mechanisms will National Treasury implement to prevent provinces from reallocating these funds away from the original purpose? We've seen it happening over and over and over again. So, before these reforms can be implemented, these questions must be answered. We've also seen, Madam Chair, that the majority of municipal infrastructure grants are spent in urban areas, while rural municipalities struggle to spend the funds due to weak institutional capacity. What differentiated support model does National Treasury propose for municipalities in districts, rural districts such as Alfred Nzo in the Eastern Cape? Coming to removing ring fencing in some grants to improve flexibility is also troublesome. What safeguards will prevent funds from being redirected to non-priority expenditure, as we have seen that's happening on the ground, especially municipalities? Furthermore, Madam Chair, some grants will now require co-funding. How will National Treasury ensure that co-funding conditions do not exclude poorer municipalities from accessing infrastructure funds due to revenue constraints? Once again, it comes back to revenue constraints and misappropriation of funds. And then lastly, Madam Chair, what is the phased implementation timeline for these reforms? There's absolutely no detail forthcoming from National Treasury. And how will National Treasury protect ongoing infrastructure projects from disruption during the transition period? Madam Chair, I'm going to conclude to say that National Treasury must submit details regarding these grant reforms. To speak about grant reforms in general does not put our unease at rest. So at this stage, I'm going to say thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Brits. Honorable Swart.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Thank you very much for all the information that was shared with us. You know, I think it was in yesterday's meeting that I also asked that there's a lot of questions that people ask, and we, you know, want to track record this, keeping it on file. Isn't there a possibility that we can get, you know, from whoever present, that we do get the answers on paper so that we can keep it and we can track record it on what people said, what people has promised. Yesterday, the president has said we are moving forward. We have got a lot of challenges, but we are moving forward. Honourable Chairperson, you know, listen to this morning, and it took me back to a meeting where the minister was also present. And I need to take this and place it on record. And it's a matter of very serious for you know, concern regarding South Africa's continued reliance on external donor funding for essential public health programs. The minister has stated that despite the withdrawal of USAID PEPFAR funding, the majority of expenditure on our HIV and AIDS response is financed from domestic resources, and that the overall impact of this withdrawal is limited. However, honourable members, the figures tell a different story. The United States withdrawal amounts to nearly 7 billion a year, and this special appropriation makes provision for only 754 million to mitigate that shortfall, less than 1/10 of what has been lost. And this development exposes the fragility of our own health financing model and underscores the urgent need to strengthen our country's fiscal self-reliance. The fight against HIV and AIDS, it's a battle. It's a time bomb in our country. And that defines the dignity and health of our own people in South Africa, and cannot remain dependent on the goodwill of foreign donors. It must be anchored in sustainable domestic investment and transparent financial management to ensure that no South African access to treatment or prevention services are placed at risk. With that in mind, Chairperson, I wish just to ask a couple of questions. And the first one on the use of funds and emergency situations. Can National Treasury confirm that mechanisms are in place to ensure oversight and prevent misuse of funds authorized under Section 16.1? And given that this is a temporary emergency allocation, what are the plans for sustainable long-term financing of these HIV and research programs beyond 2026? Has Treasury considered a risk mitigation strategy for future sudden withdrawals of donor funding? And then on slide 3 on withdrawal, how will government replace donor-driven HIV prevention capacity, especially in provinces most dependent on PEPFAR? And the second one, what assurance do we have that the US withdrawal will not lead to interruptions in ARV supply or a spike in new infection? I think we've been informed that there is already a spike in new infections, and that's why I said we're sitting on a time bomb in South Africa. can Treasury confirm if there are parallel engagements with any other international donor to fill this gap? Are we in China, or where are we busy negotiating to fill this gap? And then, Chairperson, on the provincial allocations, I just want to ask, how will Treasury and Health monitor provincial sustainability plans, and what are the consequences if province fail to comply? What timeline is set for each province to transition from donor dependency to domestically financed programs? We need to move. And then on the conditional grant review, on the slide 5, Treasury notes that redesign cannot compensate for poor governance. How will you strengthen accountability mechanisms before implementing new structures? And given that conditional grants are often misused and underspent, and that is a great concern, the underspending, and that is one question that I need to ask also to the Minister, underspending on conditional grants. And how will reforms ensure improved service delivery outcomes that we so much need, not just compliance? And then on the cross-cutting issues, how will these reforms tackle capacity deficits at municipal level? And that is another time bomb that we're setting up. The capacity deficits at municipal level, on ground level, especially in rural areas where project management and reporting are weakest. Treasury mentions alternative energy solutions and climate change resilience. Will there be new conditional grants to modifications to existing ones to fund green projects? And lastly, Madam Chair, on the provisional grant performance, what criteria were used to decide which grants to merge or discontinue? And how will Treasury prevent job losses in sectors affected by consolidation? How will you ensure extension officer support and small farmer funding are not lost in bureaucratic reshuffling? And the last one, how will Treasury ensure rural roads and transport projects remain funded under the proposed merger of the PRNG and PTOG? I've got another couple of questions, but I'm going to leave that to other colleagues also. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Swart. Honourable Ndlovu.
Thanks. Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, National Treasury. Chairperson, will you allow me to ask my questions while my video is off, please?
You may proceed, Honourable Ndlovu.
Thank you, my Chair. Chairperson, I've noted many of my questions, but unfortunately some of them have been asked by most of the honourable members because I was disturbed by my phone calls. Chair, one question that I feel that is very much need to be clarified is on the 590 million allocation to provinces is distributed unevenly, with KZN, Eastern Cape, Gauteng, and Mpumalanga receiving the largest shares. What objective criteria, including disease burden, HIV prevalence, service loads, and fiscal capacity, were used to determine provincial allocations? Chair, I think the other one is a portion of the funds is allocated to the Central Chronic Medicine Dispensing and Distribution Program. How will National Treasury assess whether these interventions has improved access to treatment in vulnerable rural districts such as OR Tambo, in Eastern Cape, Vembe, in Limpopo, and Zululand in KZN? Provinces are required to develop sustainability plans to reduce dependencies on donor funding. How many provinces have submitted credible plans to date? And what criteria does National Treasury use to determine the credibility of such plans? Chair. And I'll go to the conditional grants review, the section B. I think Honorable Brett also spoke about the issue of the municipality infrastructure grant, and I also wanted to include my municipality from Vembe, because I think he spoke about the Alfred Nzo. So is while rural municipalities struggle to spend due to weak institutional capacity, what differentiated support model does National Treasury propose for municipalities in districts such as Alfred Nzo? That was spoken about by the Honorable Reds, and I also wanted to include the Sekhukhune, which is also one of those municipalities. Honorable Chair, I don't want to waste the time because most of the questions that we highlighted, our colleagues were able to ask them. So let me just pause there, Chair. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ndlovu. Honorable Numalo, you may come in.
No, thank you very much, Chair, and my humble greetings to you and all the members connected. Chairperson, I want to also thank the presenters who presented to us this morning. It's well understood. We can now know why this special appropriation bill is coming forth. Chairperson, my question to them, because we know that if ever there's issues of procurement, there is a problem. My first question is on the provincial pharmaceutical services. They are facing a risk of inflated prices and poor contract management. What monitoring tool, Chairperson, will Treasury use to prevent fraud and corruption in the procurement of HIV and AIDS treatment commodities? Because that's where we know that if ever there are those emergencies and there are a lot of irregularities. Number two, what key performance indicators and milestones will National Treasury report to this committee to enable effective in-year oversight over the implementation and the impact on the Special Appropriation Bill 2025? Let's move to the grant, Chairperson. We know that most of our municipalities are grant dependent. Without the grant, the majority of our municipalities won't be able to do their function. My question, the municipal infrastructure grant are spent in urban areas, while rural areas or rural municipalities struggle to spend due to lack or weak institutional capacity. What differentiation support are we Treasury going to give to those rural municipalities? That's my number one. Many municipalities depend on conditional grant due to weak revenue basis. If ever we can say tomorrow there's no grant, it means those municipalities will close shops. So what analysis have the National Treasury conducted on the financial sustainability of grant-dependent municipality before implementing this reform? Because we have to check, like I've said, that most municipalities depend mostly on those grants to survive. The other matter, some grant will now require co-funding. How will the National Treasury ensure that funding conditions do not exclude poor municipalities from accessing infrastructure funds due to revenue constraint? We are still having a challenge of collecting revenue, especially in municipality, especially rural municipality. So the National Treasury has identified governance risk, including fraud, corruption, weak project management. What new accountability tool, audit framework, and monitoring system will be implemented to strengthen oversight? Because that's where we are highly we are having more challenges, where there are a lot of fraud, a lot of corruption in our different municipalities, and that derail the service delivery that we are advocating for day and night. Chairperson, these are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ngumalo, Honorable Majola.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Greetings to the members of the committee, and a special appreciation to the National Treasury for two presentations. My first deposit, Madam Chair, will be a comment. I want to thank the National Treasury for taking steps to avoid the reliance by making sure that we will take into consideration making funds available during the medium-term expenditure framework, other than to respond to the withdrawals and what have you through the special appropriation. Second comment, Madam Chair, this department is on the headlines with regards to the possible or alleged corruption. I'm referring to all what we know regarding the Tembisa Hospital, which is under investigation currently. Madam Chair, getting into legislation provision, in particular arising from the presentation, we were guided to section 16 of the PFMA requirements, where it indicated that the National Treasury requires provinces to provide monthly expenditure report and 2 quarterly performance report. I wanted to check whether before we take position on this special appropriation, did the National Treasury received these reports from the provinces, the monthly report and the quarterly performance? If so, Madam Chair, why was not integrated into a report to convince us to approve or to support the appropriation based on the evidence that has been coming from the provinces in terms of spending on what was appropriated to them? Further, Madam Chair, section 16A also requires that we submit the report to Parliament and AG, and then within 14 days, we've been informed, arising from the presentation, that that exercise was performed. My question is to check from the National Treasury, because I don't believe we were doing that for courtesy. What was the position of the Auditor General? Did the Auditor General responded on what we submitted to them regarding the special appropriation? Did they give the okay to it? The last question, Madam Chair, on special appropriation regarding the money that will be channeled, which is 590 million through the HIV and AIDS conditional grant. Again, Madam Chair, maybe if I've missed it, I was not influenced as the figures in front of us in terms of the provincial allocations. Was it influenced by the impact on an individual of HIV and AIDS in the individual provinces? Was it influenced by the population? Maybe if one can get a further clarity, Madam Chair, on the form of the formula used to allocate the 592 to different and 8 provinces, excluding the Northern Cape. Going to the conditional grants, Madam Chair. Firstly, let me concur with the presenter, Madam Chair, with regards to the public transport network grant, and then with the proposals that were given to us. Really, Madam Chair, I've been monitoring this grant in a number of areas. Just to be precisely, where I come from at Msunduzi, there was this grant allocated to the municipality. It was called an integrated rapid transport network. Madam Chair, it is a white elephant at the moment. I'm glad that the National Treasury had zoomed in terms of the performance of this grant, and then we will re-evaluate, and it's really disappointment. I wanted to concur with the previous speaker, whether do we still need in a form of a grant, or we populate it to an equitable share, but it will have challenges in terms of monitoring. Again, Madam Chair, with regards to the grant, we were informed arising from the presentation that the grant expenditure should not be only in a percentage format, but it has to speak also to the improved service delivery. I wanted to check from the National Treasury, except the percentage spending which we normally received towards the end of the financial year. Do we have an instrument to measure the second component, which is the improved service delivery in terms of the conditional grants? The other question is on page, on slide 9. There was a comment there, Madam Chair, where it says eliminate ring fencing in general purpose grant. I want to check, Madam Chair, whether do we have a grant which is just general like that, which is just a grant without any condition attached to it. If they are, I want to check whether is through the reform of this grant, do we have to carry on with such a grant which does not have conditions? Because if so, well, we will easily transfer those funds through equitable share. The second one, no, the last one, Madam Chair, it's with regards to the NHI implementation. It tells us here that there is no plan, so there is no expenditure with regards to the money which were earmarked for that. Is there any plan to review, to match, to align, to reappropriate as we are waiting for the adjustment, mid-year adjustment budget. The very last one, Madam Chair, with regards to the MIG, we have been informed through the presentation that the National Treasury is intending to increase the base allocation of 5 million and then align it with the inflation. Is it a proper, Madam Chair, to align it with the inflation, or the best practice is to look at the need, and then we come out to the conclusion as to how much we need to appropriate to a different municipality through a MIC. Madam Chair, I concur with the National Treasury. There are so many grant funding. I think they've mentioned the number of 55. One is fully support in terms of trying to align the one of the same purposes, and then we also consider of eliminating the ones that are not of the essential in terms of the conditional grant. Rather, we look at other means of assisting provinces and municipalities in terms of funding. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Majola. By now, I'm used to your style of asking questions. We'll be going to the last, the second last, the very last, and the ultimate last. Over to you, Honorable Ryder.
Apology, Madam Chair.
Honorable Ryder.
Last of last one. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I think a lot of questions have been asked, and I specifically want to focus on the appropriations, the special appropriation. You've explained to us where the money is going to. That's fine, and I think that we're all aware of the need and the fact that the suddenness of the issue needs to be addressed, and etc. I do want to ask two pertinent questions based on it, though. Number one, and this is the most important, is where's the money coming from? Tell us where it's going to. You haven't indicated where the money is coming from. And so it would appear from the schedule that's been supplied with the bill, it's not a case of cost cutting or cost savings that have been found either within the department or in other, or being, appropriated from a budget cut or a saving in a different department. So this appears to be additional funding that's being allocated in terms of the budget. Now, I've had a look at the last state of budgets that Treasury published in the Gazette. It does appear to me that SARS is collecting a little, above where it was this time last year. But I'm not sure how that fits in with exactly their targets and their projections for the end of the year. Of course, any surplus collections by SARS provide us with a choice, and we need to decide, do we use that to reduce debt, or do we apply it in other ways to top up funding where there are sudden needs, such as this particular one. So if you can just talk to me a little bit about the source of the funds, and what alternatives have been weighed, in terms of how best to use the funds, any surpluses. Maybe you can give us a bit of a heads up about SARS's performance on a year-to-date basis. As I say, the information on the stated budget is there, but perhaps, as with many Treasury issues, the full story is not in the table provided. There's always additional information that we don't get to see, and a comparison, a year-on-year comparison, doesn't tell you how you're performing against your projections. So that information is going to help us. The other issue is that we have had indications, and it's been quite clear in the behavior of the United States over the last couple of months that a decision by them is not a permanent decision. And there's indications that some of PEPFAR will be reinstated. And so what's going to happen to any surpluses that then come about as a result of perhaps a funding duplication brought about by this special appropriation and then a re-implementation of some or all of PEPFAR? Now, I don't follow the thing that closely, and I'm not sure, but there seemed to be a commitment that some funding would start flowing again, and I'm not sure how recent that was. So, it's now a case of what's going to happen if there is a surplus. Is there an agreement with the national and provincial departments that if we give them too much money, that they'll send some of it back, that it can be used optimally, and so I guess it's kind of a clawback in case there's a duplication. That's my question on that. Chair, I think there's been a number of questions on the rejigging of the conditional grants. I think this is a complex space, as Honourable Majola indicated. It has effectively become a case of micromanaging certain allocations to direct behaviour, and so a rethinking of that, because it started off as a good idea and then just compounded into something that is far less manageable. I'm certainly no expert, and I do think it would have been wonderful to hear from our provincial colleagues on the plans going forward, because they're the ones that deal with it every day. But I mean, even at a budget council, it's only the finance MECs that participate, and the impact of some of these changes may be, either uncertain, not clear immediately, etc., and may be better understood by the MECs responsible for the individual portfolios. So I do think that it's something I'm going to have to consult on further with my province, certainly. I think there are a number of questions. I would tentatively welcome the simplification of the process, and initially I have to say I was against it, but I do think that the comprehensive comments that Treasury put forward in the budget review document in February, March of this year have made me a little more comfortable with it. But again, I think that there are going to be unintended consequences. I'm not qualified to understand exactly what those are. I think we need to consult as much as possible to get as much information from our individual provinces in order to understand this better. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Chair, and thanks to Treasury for lots of information already shared, and hopefully lots more to come in response to these questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Ryder. Mekha Oregwe and Team Treasury, kindly respond to members' comments and questions.
Okay, thank you, Honourable Chair and Honourable members. We will start with the special appropriations. So Mashudu and Jonathan will start. You may respond. I'll deal with the issues of the consequence management and perhaps SARS and yeah. So if you could start with the questions on special appropriations. Thank you.
No, thanks, Ohale, and good morning once more, honorable members. I just wish to indicate, Ohale, that we also have MP here and Shalil, so they may want to come in on the issues dealing specifically with certain clauses in the special appropriation bill. But I'm going to start, and some questions, Jonathan will come in after me. On the question by Honorable Siwisa on what plans do we have to ensure that there is manpower in provinces for the health sector, especially for the administration of medicine. Honorable member, you will recall that the budget 2025, the Minister of Finance did indicate in his budget speech that there are provisional allocations to the health sector, specifically to deal with the issue of capacitation, employment of doctors, etc. That I think it's the amount in here to the health sector is around 6.7 billion rand, and the plan is to release that funding immediately in here now, so that those funds can flow to provinces and expenditure can start happen for capacity related issues. Honorable Brits, on the issue of criteria used, my colleague Jonathan will come in on that, but I will also address your question on why the special appropriation bill, why shouldn't this wait for the normal adjustments? I think as you know, the normal adjustments appropriation bill gets considered quite late by Parliament, and it usually gets assented to by the President each year, somewhere in January, which would have been very late for provinces to access this emergency funding, and hence the Section 16 and the Special Appropriation Bill to ensure that these funds are accessible immediately without delay, given the urgency or emergency nature. Honorable Swartz, you have raised several concerns about the monitoring issues. I think Ohale and other colleagues who deals with provincial issues will address those questions. Again, let me just touch or indicate why the Section 16. But I think this was highly influenced by, although the issue of withdrawal, PEPFAR withdrawal, was sort of in the news a bit earlier, but you will agree with me, Honorable Member, Honorable Swart, that the sudden nature of that withdrawal, without providing some sort of scaling down of the programs, it was quite drastic. And that was going to impact some of the programs severely because there was just an immediate stopping of funding, which was going to affect HIV/AIDS research and certain programs in provinces. And hence, that was the main motivation for the Section 16 authorization of funding. And you asked the question, Honorable Swart, what are the plans beyond the current financial year? So the National Department of Health, as part of the 2026 MTF budget preparations, they have sent some funding requests or plans that require funding for the 2026 MTF. And those discussions and considerations are still ongoing within National Treasury as part of the 2026 MTF budget process. So the plans and discussions to sustain funding over the MTF, those discussions are continuing. Honorable Ndlovu, you asked the question on how many provinces have submitted their plans to date. I think my colleague Jonathan is going to address that question. As I said, the questions related to monitoring of expenditure of Ohale and the team, they will come to that. Honorable Majola, you also indicated that the Section 16 of the Special Appropriation Bill requires us to submit those reports within 14 days after authorization of this expenditure. And your question was, did the AG, after receiving the report from Treasury, did they okay it or not? But I wish to indicate that Section 16(4) of the PFMA does not really require approval by the AG or Auditor General. It is just for their information. But after we send the Minister's authorization of this Section 16 expenditure, we have not yet received any feedback from the Auditor General. Honorable Ryder, on the issue of this funding, where are we moving money from, or where are we sourcing money from? Is this additional funding? Yes, this is additional funding in here, and hence it's being reflected in the special appropriation bill, and it will also become part of overall adjustments for the year to the health sector. In terms of Section 16.3 of the PFMA, the authorization of expenditure in terms of Section 16.1 of the PFMA, this expenditure becomes a direct charge to the National Revenue Fund in terms of Section 16.3 of the PFMA. You will recall that in terms of the funding source, you will recall that when the Minister of Finance tabled the 2025 MTF budget, there was a contingency reserve of around 5 billion rand. So most of the adjustments in here are being addressed through that contingency reserve. However, this special appropriation of Section 16 funding, it draws its funding directly from the National Revenue Fund as a direct charge. The other question that you indicated, or another comment, Honorable Ryder, is that you indicated that there are some reports that shows that PEPFAR funding will be reinstated. What will happen to the surplus? I must indicate from our perspective as National Treasury, we haven't had those sort of reports, and even our interaction with the National Department of Health, we haven't really sort of received a report in that regard about potential reinstatement of PEPFAR-related funding. We are aware that there is some continuation, as we indicated in the presentation, for the CDC-related programs that will continue. But the bulk of the HIV/AIDS programs that were funded by PEPFAR, specifically channeled through the USAID, from what we know now, those funding has stopped. In the interest of time, Honorable Chairperson, I'm going to cede to my colleague Jonathan to add on other aspects of the criteria and other questions that I may have omitted. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mashudu, and good morning, honorable members, honorable chair. Just to address some of the other questions. So the first one from Honorable Brits that Mashudu has partly addressed already about the criteria for Section 16 and why not wait until the AE&E. So the PFMA, so the Section 16 of PFMA, the criteria laid out there is that the expenditure must be of an exceptional nature that is not provided for, and that without serious prejudice to the public interest cannot be postponed to a future parliamentary appropriation. So that's the sort of legal criteria. In terms of how we interpreted those in this case, of course, Mashudu already laid out sort of how abrupt these announcements by the US government were. It was sort of like an overnight announcement, and all of a sudden there were thousands of health workers in the country that either were retrenched or told to temporarily not come to work. There were many NGOs that are dependent on PEPFAR funding that faced imminent closure. A lot of these NGOs are particularly important for prevention services. Treatment is largely funded by government funds, but a lot of these NGOs that were PEPFAR funded are critical for prevention services. With regard to the research, the the US government-funded research projects involve many clinical trials, and because these are clinical in nature, there's of course ethical considerations to consider. You can't just stop them abruptly, so you need to make, if you're not able to continue the trials, you need to at least make provision to ensure that the trials can close in an ethical manner, given the clinical nature of many of those. So those are some of the considerations that we took when determining that this could not wait until a future adjustments budget. There was a question regarding the CCMDD from Honorable Ndlovu and whether this has been evaluated, whether it's shown to be effective in terms of delivering frontline services. There was an evaluation done of the CCMDD program last year. It did show that CCMDD had increased retention on treatment compared to patients that were receiving conventional care in facilities. It also showed that CCMDD had resulted in decongestion of clinic, in the sense that if you can collect your ARV medicines or other chronic medicines in an external pickup point, you don't have to queue in the facility. So it led to decongestion of facilities. And I think also the CCMDD patients reported a higher level of satisfaction. So I think, according to the evaluation that was shared with us by the Department of Health last year, the CCMDD program was shown to be largely effective in delivering frontline services. In terms of the question on the plans, how many plans we have received. So we have received, so the requirement is for provinces to submit plans to the National Department of Health. And the National Department of Health has then forwarded updated business plans to us. We still need to interrogate those in a little bit more detail to see whether they are sufficiently addresses the sustainability aspects of this, but we have received them. In terms of reports, the reason why we decided to go for monthly reports on expenditure and quarterly reports on performance is that the sector can use the existing reporting procedures for that. So they already provide monthly expenditure reports through the AWAM systems, and they provide quarterly performance reports on conditional grants. So we're still waiting for the first quarterly performance report from the Department of Health. But as soon as we receive those, which are due soon, we will, of course, look at to what extent they have addressed these issues in those reports. I think I will stop there. Thank you, honorable members.
Okay, Honorable Chair and members, I'll answer other questions. So in terms of consequence management, so what the Division of Revenue indicates that what all National Transferring Officer needs to implement is that if a province or municipality doesn't comply, in this case it will be provinces, provincial departments of health, the national department, in this case health, can withhold the funds from the province to ensure that they correct that behavior within, it depends, so it could be for 30 days or more than 30 days, but not obviously they'll have to apply to National Treasury so that we okay that withholding. So in some instances they do just alert us to say withheld, but if it's for a certain number of days, they'll have to ask for approval. So if the province in this case does not correct its behavior, the next remedial action will be to stop the funds flowing to that particular province. So those are the mechanisms that we have in place in terms of the Division of Revenue. And I think Jonathan has already spoken about the report, and I think this report as well answers Honorable Majola's question on the we have financial reports, and then what about performance on the service delivery? So the quarterly reports that Jonathan spoke about also applicable to these other grants that in the second presentation we made. I thought I should make that point. So I think there was an issue about 7 billion versus 760, just to say there was audit done in terms of the services that were provided through donor funding. And obviously, as indicated by Jonathan, mostly in terms of the medication and all of that is done through the conditional grant. So there were found to be some sort of inefficiencies in that area. Hence, I think if you look at what we have provided, it's only that 760. But maybe on the point of provincial pharmaceutical services, the issues of procurement of ARVs and the corruption that may exist, just to indicate that in this area, particularly the ARVs or medicines, in most cases, National Department has a transversal contract. So they negotiate contract nationally. And these contracts, all provinces buy from these contracts. And this ensures that the efficiencies in the system. And so they do this from time to time. Once the contract ends, they look at they put others in place to ensure that there is efficiencies in the system. So maybe the last point, maybe Chair and honorable members will forgive us on this one of SARS revenue collection. So if members will allow us to just not respond to this one and allow Minister to speak about it during the table of the MTBPS on the 12th of November, if members do not mind. I think that's all. We'll stop the first part, Chair, and then we'll go to the second one. And then I'll ask Dr. Letsepa Pakis and Wendy to start with the responses. Dr. Pakis?
Thanks, Dirichi, and thanks to the members for really engaging questions. I'm going to attempt to respond to them. I think I've grouped them. There's about 9 themes in the mains, and then the others that perhaps Wendy and the Dirichi can come and polish up. Honorable members, I think a key theme is around the differentiated support for rural municipalities, and I think there's a worry that these reforms aren't looking at this holistically, and I think I want to just give the honorable members some comfort that National Treasury does recognize disproportionate allocations of grants, and that there are grants mainly for the urban space where actually spending is taking place. But we just want to assure the honorable members that of the general purpose grants, the MEAG allocations, actually they are guided by a formula that prioritizes municipalities with significant infrastructure backlogs that also have limited revenue generating capacity. So they do then ensure that rural areas receive adequate funding from what is available. And the grants like the Water Services Infrastructure Grant as well as the Regional Bulk Infrastructure Grant are also specifically designed to address the rural infrastructure needs in terms of the water and sanitation. So where the differentiation works now is that whilst there are these number of grants, so now I've just mentioned 3 for the rural space, but the metros in the main for the same services, which means it's your water and sanitation. They actually have one grant, which is the Urban Settlement Development Grant. And the reforms around the Urban Settlement Development Grant are different to what we are instituting in terms of the MIC and the Water Services Infrastructure Grant, as well as the Regional Park Infrastructure Grant. So the honorable members must really find comfort that differentiation in the system still applicable, and also that the issues around fairness in how allocations are made is still skewed towards those municipalities without much in terms of the own revenues. But we just want to emphasize the alignment of the MIG funded projects with the IDPs of municipalities to then address the rural priorities as well, because funding is available, but whether that funding addresses the rural issues is something that needs to be looked at. And then, honorable members, there was also a question around, I think, the sustainability of grant-dependent municipalities. And also, we want to acknowledge that many of the municipalities, particularly in rural areas, are heavily grant-dependent and will continue to rely on the grants because of the limited capacity. So there is no expectation now that that is going to change. Unlike some institutions that would perhaps maybe see rural municipalities and merge them and hope that there would be better performing municipalities. From this process, we have been looked at it from that perspective. We actually acknowledge that those municipalities actually need additional help, which is now on the capacity side as well, because they being rural, lacking that capacity means that they really shouldn't be getting those grants that promote a lot of, I think, discretion. So now they're dependent on grants that have support that comes with it. So the water services infrastructure grant, for instance, comes with that support from the Department of Water and Sanitation. So they benefit in that fashion. And I think another leg to it, which I need to clarify, is on the co-funding. So in cases where municipalities are not only providing infrastructure for the poor, right, but also have wealthier communities within those, there might be a small proportion. So those are the ones where co-funding is required. And applicable. So municipalities then are expected to co-fund only the economic component. So for that subset of the community that is wealthy or that is affording of paying for the services, so they need to then co-fund that part. I mean, that can be done in a number of ways in terms of the recovery of costs that the municipalities would need to put in front, right? So here, these municipalities obviously would then be able to have the capacity to go borrow and to do so and enter into some partnerships, which would say them putting initial investment, but perpetually they would be able to recover these from the wealthier communities that they serve. I guess others really just emphasize a need for a differentiated approach in the system. And I think I want to emphasize that, also the allocation criteria around these reforms are also still, trying to address the issue of equity, and where we bring in the element of efficiency, it is not to the detriment of municipalities. So it's not on the base allocation. So we're adding components that for incentives, which will then drive the good behavior. So we'll get compensated for how great you are doing in those areas. And then on the issue of accountability accountability and oversight tools. I think the point is taken. We are also, as the Treasury, leading a number of reforms in the space in streamlining the reporting requirements through initiatives like the MFMA Circular 88, which does standardize reporting formats and reduces a duplication there, and some of our infrastructure reforms as well are really assisting in terms of the real-time monitoring of infrastructure, and they're starting to leverage technology in how that is implemented through the IDMS and the other systems that we have in that space. The great questions are around how then measuring improved service delivery from this work is being done. And of course, we have developed some instrument to measure the impact of the grants. So there are these performance indicators that I've already alluded to, but also the conditional grants framework include the measurable outputs and delivery indicators that can be tracked over time. And these grant managing departments are also supposed to provide after each financial year, an evaluation report, which also tells us how far we are in terms of addressing the backlogs that we have. And this is why honorable members were able to phase some of these conditional grants into the equitable shares because of how well we have done. And the recent census data is actually shown that in the electricity space, we are now 95% in terms of where we are in terms of electrification, meaning that we have over the years improved in as far as that is concerned. But also we recognize that we could have done more and better, which is why we continue to make efforts to improve the system. So in terms of the elimination of ring fencing and grant conditions, I think we just recognize that while most of the grants have these conditions to ensure accountability, we also need to recognize that, you know, where capacity exists to make independent decisions that are, you know, have on the past shown, you know, to promote better decision making, we should enforce that flexibility. I don't know whether the honorable members saw there was an opinion piece actually that was out. One of the honorable members in the Western Cape weighing in on the issue of the CASP grant, how moving from a Schedule 4 to a Schedule 5 has impacted operations. So in line with that, you know, we are looking at some of these grants. So how can we then take them back to the original makeup and what was intended? So grants like a education infrastructure grant, you know, they provide that discretion as a Schedule 4 grant to provinces, you know, so that they can fund their own priorities aligned with the broader national objectives, of course. And then there were also issues, honorable members, on the MIG-based allocation. I may not have been clear on this one, honorable members, so please sincere apologies for that. So in the MIG, the base proposal indicates that the initial allocation is actually 5 million, which is what we've had for the past 15 years or so, even more. So we're proposing increasing that to 7.5 million. And then in the subsequent years, that's where we start to talk about inflation-linked increases as well. And this inflation-linked adjustment then ensures that, you know, the base allocation maintains the real value over time, accounting for those rising costs. And the problem here, honorable members, if we leave it at 5 million as we have, it means what you could afford with 5 million, if you could build a sports facility with that amount 15 years ago, surely you can't do the same now. So we do need to then realize that there needs to be a top-up that is required for that to be able to happen. And having said that, honorable members, there are other components. So this 7 million, we're talking about a 19 billion investment here in terms of the MIG. Each year it's 19 billion. So 7.5 million is a really small amount in relation to that, meaning that other components within the MIG will continue to be determined based on the equity considerations as well as the infrastructure backlogs. So the worry from the honorable member that why are we, using inflation when they are backlogs, those are dealt with from the much bigger components within the MIG. This is just to safeguard those municipalities, especially the smaller ones that are getting a smaller allocation, so that they can at least have an adjustment in as far as that is concerned. We agree with the honorable members in terms of the roads-related grants, in terms of the reforms. They should be able to assist us in addressing the current issues, whether that is managed by the Department of Transport or it is within the MIG. But I think certainly the issues there in that space really require some urgent investment, which is why then, honorable members, this is going to a detailed spending review, because some of these we just need to rejuggle and relook at whether we actually, can do things much better or rejiggle even the policies that inform some of these grants as well. So on questions around improving service delivery and addressing capacity deficiencies, I think, honorable members, the streamlining of the grant reduces duplication and also the administrative burden to allow for municipalities to then focus on service delivery. So one of the issues that has come out quite strongly from municipalities is that the many grants that exist in the system, they actually bring a lot of burden to them in terms of compliance. So we also allow eliminating elements of compliance in the system that are not necessary. Of course, we do need to continue to safeguard these funds as well, which is why also the performance-based incentives are also being meant to be introduced. And some of these reforms, honorable members, you are right, we could have been more clearer in terms of the details. But some of these, they really depend on the availability of the data to implement them. So for instance, the incentive components within the PRMG is dependent on the availability of the data. So if the data at the source where the provinces are providing it is poor, it then would then cascade to poor incentive being implemented in the system. So we do need to start with addressing the issue of the data. Then we can then be able to phase these reforms in a more responsible and a phased manner. The issue around the green projects, how we're funding those, we just want to make it clear to the honorable members that obviously, for instance, when the white paper was put in 1998, I mean, some of these discussions weren't taking place in the manner in which they are now. So climate issues weren't as evident as they are now. So there's a need for us to then relook at those. So the white paper is looking at how we can respond to the issue of the climate reality, and then the local government fiscal framework will in the main help us look at the green funding. But what is quite clear at this point, the indication from the grants review process is that you can't see these as separate funding, because if you then do that, then you will continue to do, what you've always done with the grants, and then depend on the new allocation, for instance, to then take care of the green projects and stuff. So we say it's the change in the culture and the mentality in how we deliver the services that needs to change. So we're incorporating that thinking into the sources we already have, meaning now the conditions around the USDG, the MIG and IUTG will need to take into account how we're doing things better in building climate resilient infrastructure. going forward. But also these grants provide allocations for refurbishment of the infrastructure, meaning that we can now go back to the infrastructure we have and then see how we can make it climate resilient as well, rather than just exploring additional resources. And of course, a lot has been pledged in this space, so we are taking advantage of that as well. There could be some announcement in terms of some of the projects, especially on the just energy transition as well, that will be implemented, which are also just trying to help us, deal with those matters as well. The criteria in terms of matching the grants is a clear one. It's where it's feasible and it makes sense to do so. Where the grants are overlapping in terms of the purposes, those can be consolidated to improve efficiency as well. And where we can simplify administration through reducing the reporting burden as well. On safeguarding jobs, I will leave that for Wendy and the DDG to deal with that part as well. Just as a parting shot, honorable members, I think these reforms for us in terms of the phased implementation, there's a lot that needs to be done to be invested in consultation at this level, because you don't want a situation where you hurry in terms of implementing the reforms and then you find at a later stage that you don't have the necessary buy-in, which is why we still have opened a room for that consultation, which is why some of these are not going to be implemented in this budget. In the next budget, we do invest implementing more reforms as well as we move forward. But the key issue, honorable members, I think it is on building capacity, sustainable capacity across the three spheres of government. And there's a growing frustration from everyone involved that giving money to municipalities that are not going to be able to spend is not helping. So we need to come with solutions outside of the box solutions that start to help us deal with the issue of capacity. We can build capacity gradually, but in the immediate, should we be standing and doing nothing about those things? So those are the kind of discussions that are currently taking place as far as the grants are concerned, in terms of what is then the immediate action that we do, while it makes sense for us to then continue to work towards building that capacity at local government level. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Letsepa. Wendy.
Thank you. I'll just deal with the issues that Letsepa didn't deal with, and he dealt with most. The first thing I want to do, because the question was asked, what is a general purpose grant and whether there's conditions attached to it. Just to indicate what a general purpose grant is, it means that the conditional grant is available to be used for multiple infrastructure purposes, for example, if it's a general purpose infrastructure grant. So the municipal infrastructure grant, or MIC, is an example of that. It can be used for water, sanitation, electricity, roads, municipal buildings, roads. And so it's informed by the municipal IDP, and it then gets used in terms of its own purposes. It's different to a sector-based grant where, for example, there's various water grants in the system and it cannot be used for anything else but water. So general purpose grant is not without conditions. It's definitely with conditions. It just provides more flexibility for a municipality to decide on which infrastructure projects it wants to spend it on. Then in terms of the consolidation of grants, where it comes to the consolidation of grants, it is to merge complementary programs that's funded through different conditional grants. So when a conditional grant is merged, all the purposes of the two conditional grants are consolidated into one. So it should not result in job losses. It should actually strengthen the hand of the sector to provide more integrated service delivery, for example, in the agricultural space, where grants are proposed for being merged. Then to give another example in terms of the benefits of the consolidation,
Reference were made to the fact that the education infrastructure grant, which is a direct grant where provinces spend the money directly, and the school backlog infrastructure grant, which is an indirect grant that is currently spent by the National Department of Basic Education on behalf of provinces, where it will be merged and become a direct grant. We've had discussions with the National Department of Basic Education. So where the staff are currently focusing on grant, implementation, the focus will then shift for those staff and that department to strengthen its hand in the oversight of the infrastructure projects that's done by the provinces. So it will actually result in improved oversight, and that is often very lacking in a lot of national departments. So the whole idea of this reform is to strengthen the existing system and to make it stronger by removing duplications and ensuring that there's more grant coherence in the system. And where grants are failing or it's met its objectives, then it's only then considered for grant to be stopped. But that's in very limited cases. And as this, system evolves, we will also provide more information to the committees. And then another thing that's also important to note, it's not National Treasury instructing this. Where a grant is merged or where, for example, in the education space, we are working very directly with the National Department of Basic Education. We ensure that it's done in a very streamlined way. We first ensuring that all the projects that they're currently busy with are completed, and only when that is completed, the money will be incorporated into the direct grant. So we do it in consultation with the national departments to ensure that there's streamlined conversions and there's no adverse impact on service delivery and infrastructure delivery. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think the questions have been responded, but maybe just to say on the issue of the NHI implementation, I think the point we're making in the presentation is that we did not necessarily want to either phase those grants into the equitable share or match them in whichever way, but just to leave them as is, given that we know that the president has sent the act, the legislation in this regard, and this work that the national department is doing in this regard. So, and I think maybe just to make the last point about, we have noted obviously the issues that the members have raised with regards to the issues around the corruption that is in the system. A point was made by about Tembisa that is in the news right now. And just to say, I think as National Treasury, National Treasury is trying to find ways of how then do we make the system transparent, whether through modernization of supply chain management. And I think at the right time, the minister will come to Parliament and indicate what are the measures that the National Treasury is currently working on. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much, DDG and Team Treasury. I see the hand of Honorable Ryder, or any other member. Can I see you with a show of hand if your questions were sufficiently answered to, or you would want to make a follow-up? And each member that is making a follow-up will be given 2 minutes, not beyond that, to talk to their issues. Honorable Ryder, you may make your point.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Yeah, Chair, I really don't feel that I got a satisfactory answer as to the source of funds for the special appropriation. It needs to be stated explicitly, please. Is this as a result of over-collection, additional revenue that we've received, or will we be borrowing funds in order to meet this additional appropriation, or will we be reducing our any surplus or increasing our deficit? Essentially, it's the same question. But yeah, I think we need to know exactly where the money is coming from. Any budget, any household budget, if suddenly there's an additional expense, there's a sacrifice, or there must be an additional source of income to cover it. So please, we are really must insist on getting an answer on that. Thank you, Chair.
DDG.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The straight answer is that the direct response is that is funded from the contingency reserve. As Honorable Ryder would know, that we have budgeted 5 billion for the contingency reserve to fund such issues such as emergencies, whether it's disasters and all of that. That's where we normally fund the emergency, the items requiring emergency funding. So I hope it's sufficient, Honorable Ryder.
Honorable Brits.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, just a general remark. No, all my questions have not been answered, but I think our specific questions, I will submit written questions to the Minister in this regard further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brits. You can also forward your questions to Mr. Nodada to share with National Treasury, especially the ones which you have asked during this meeting and which you feel that they were not adequately responded to. Is it okay, Honorable Brits?
That will be in order, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable members of the Select Committee and members of the Portfolio Committees on Finance from provinces, and the representative from National Treasury led by DDG Gaurekwe, I think we've come to the end of the discussions on both the Special Appropriations Bill, which is Bill 22 of 2025, and the Conditional Grants Review and Reforms. I should indicate that we really, as a committee, appreciate the National Treasury's thorough briefing and responses to the questions that members have asked and the clarity that you have provided to some of the concerns by the meeting. But I should also indicate that it was throughout this meeting that there was an emphasis over transparency, accountability, and prudent fiscal management, which are crucial in ensuring that public resources are utilized effectively. We will, as a committee, expect that National Treasury will implement the recommendation and address the concerns raised during meetings. And also, as honorable members, I think it is our expectation that National Treasury will identify and mitigate against the potential risks associated with all these appropriations. Having said that, honorable members, can we allow the National Treasury to step off the platform and the members from provincial legislatures for us to continue with the work of the committee? Thank you very much once again, National Treasury. Thanks for always giving inside information to members of this portfolio committee. It really assists us in doing our oversight work. Thank you very much. You may step off the platform. Mr. Nodada, Honorable Ryder, do you want to say something?
No, Chair.
Okay.
Still haven't been answered, but that's fine. I'm putting a written question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Kindly also forward to Mr. Nodada so that a follow-up can properly be made if your questions were not adequately responded to. Mr. Nodada, I'm going to request that you put the program. All we're going to do for today, colleagues, now is a 10 minutes briefing, 10 minutes or less than that briefing for the oversight that we'll be taking next week, both the content of the oversight and the program and its logistics. I'm going to request Mr. Nodada to briefly give members the logistical arrangements and talk to the program, then later hand over to Mr. Lomo to take us through the content. And kindly summarize the content, Mr. Lomo, the content of the oversight. And while they're still preparing or while they're still flagging, colleagues, let me remind you that on Friday, there's an engagement with the provincial legislature of Gauteng as they have requested to have a benchmarking meeting with the PBO, and we were also invited, honorable members. Those that are available may join the meeting. Details will be sent to your good selves, and they have previously been sent. They will be resent to yourselves. And after today's meeting, I think you will get the presentation as promised, as what we have prepared as the Select Committee on Appropriations, as a presentation that will be presented in the Friday's meeting, because I don't think all members will be in attendance, but it will be great to have some of the members attending that meeting. Over to you, Mr. Nodada.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good afternoon, still good morning, Chairperson and honorable members. Chairperson, there isn't much to share at this stage, except to indicate that the applications are under consideration, both political and financial. However, there's been a glitch with respect to the political application. The House Chairperson signed the political application on Friday, and it was submitted to the Office of the Chief Whip on Friday still. And I was in contact with the Office of the Chief Whip, and an impression was created to me. The unfortunate part is that this was verbal through the phones, that the application has been processed and it is with the Office of the NCOP Chairperson, only to discover when we made a follow-up yesterday afternoon that that was not the case. And the political application only reached the Office of the NCOP Chairperson last night. So the office is still processing that application. That's far. We are still waiting for it with bated breath. And with respect to the financial application, there's some movement. It is under consideration by the section manager of committees. Once both applications have been signed, then we'll start working on issuing purchase orders, and flights will be confirmed. Members will receive SMSs with respect to flights. We are crossing fingers because there's some indication that flights are spaces within flights are kind of running out. So we hope that everything will be sorted soon. Yeah, so far that's that, Chairperson. Thanks, but we'll continue updating the Chairperson if there are any challenges that we're experiencing. And yeah, let me leave it at that point, Chairperson. Thank you.
The draft program for the 2 days of the oversight.
Mr. Zomo, I thought the Chairperson asked you to kind of deal with this one in summary, also addressing the issue of content. I remember she even said you may consider summarizing everything. Over to you, Mhlekas.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, honorable members and colleagues. Yeah, Chair, I'll take you through the content of the oversight and the program. I'll leave it to Mr. Nodada, Chair, as we have requested.
Continue, Mr. Loma.
Sorry, Chair.
I was saying proceed. We lost you a bit there.
Yeah, I was saying, Chair, I'll take you through the content of the oversight, but the program.
Please do take us through the content.
As it is reflected, I'll leave it to Mr. Nodada to deal with.
Okay. Please proceed.
Mr. Nodada, can you flag the content, the brief of the oversight?
Okay, just a second, Chairperson.
Mr. Lomo, you can talk to the background while he's still looking for it. I think members got the documents. You can, for now, talk to the background while Mr. Nodada is looking for the document.
Okay, Chair. Thank you very much, Chairperson and members and colleagues. Good morning. Just by way of background, Chair, working with the Chairperson and colleagues, we have identified the Northwest Province as one of the focus areas when it comes to the oversight visit. Where we'll be focusing, the committee will be focusing on the Health Facility Revitalization Grant funded project. Can we go to introduction, Mr. Nodada? And the rationale behind that, Chair, is that the Health Facility Revitalization Grant is one of the issues that were flagged by the Sixth Parliament Committee in its legacy report as outstanding, and this committee, during its strategic planning, has actually adopted this as one of its priorities for the seventh Parliament. Can you go down a little bit? And Chair, the context of this, Chair, the grant basically is a direct grant to the provincial health departments, and its intention is to build, upgrade and refurbish health facilities, improve functionality and compliance with health standards, and also strengthen health systems, infrastructure and preparation for the NHI, address all historical infrastructure backlogs, and expand capacity for clinical training through institutions such as nursing colleges. Obviously, Chair, there's been some evolution on the grant, as it was formerly known as a hospital revitalization grant, but because there was a need to expand the scope of the grant, given the alarming need for maintenance and refurbishment in the health facilities across, this grant was then changed into health facility to accommodate all the facilities in health. Obviously, there are some legislative and fiscal oversight frameworks that are guiding the oversight and the work of the committee, which I'm not going to go through in the interest of time, with its key provisions. And what are the conditions of the grant as it stands? It's important, Chair, for members to have a dive deep on these conditions, which may inform their questions during the oversight visit. But also not only to check whether these conditions have been complied with, but also to see if these conditions can be refined for a better implementation of the grant and unlock some of the bottlenecks that on the ground the implementing agencies are actually implementing. It's important, Chair, to make that point, because a conditions in each grant should not be a hindrance to delivery, but conditions should strike a balance between expenditure and actually the delivery. And that's why you've got a situation where the spending goes quicker and you find that the service delivery on the ground is lagging behind. Can go down. And also, we're raising the issue of the importance of oversight, Chair, that the oversight should not only be about the boardroom meetings. It should go beyond the boardroom meetings where presentations are made, but the committee has a responsibility, which is the constitutional mandate, to go down and track what has been approved during the budget, whether it's doing what it's supposed to do, and what are the key challenges that are experienced by the implementing agencies and by the provincial departments. And that in itself, Chair, informs the committee on its recommendations when it's dealing with the future budget and other related matters in future, because it will have a first-hand information on what is it that is happening on the ground. For instance, currently the Treasury is busy with the review of conditional grant. The report was presented before the committee. But it's very difficult to deal with that report, Chair, if the committee has not done its work or its part in terms of ensuring that it verifies all those challenges that the Treasury has been lifting on the report. Can you proceed? There are some scholars also, Chair, that are agreeing with our view on the importance of legislative oversight. I'm not going to go through them. It's just a literature review. Chair, there are 4 facilities that have been identified in the Northwest for oversight for the committee. One being the Mabato Nursing College in Gakamodiri Malema in Mahikeng municipality. And I must say, Chair, that this facility has been identified by both the Appropriations Committee and Finance Committee. So there's going to be a joint activity on this one, which is quite important because, you know, collaborative work is one of the issues that we often emphasize in Parliament, in the legislature, which does not only, we are not only encouraging amongst committees in Parliament, but also even between Parliament and provincial legislature committees, so that at least that improves the impact on the ground, on the work of the legislative sector on the ground. And that collaborative work requires a clearly demarcated roles and responsibilities, Chair, so that there are no conflict and other challenges. The second project is again in Gakamodiri Molema in Mahikeng, which is Bopilong Psychiatric Hospital, which we will give the details on the next table. The third one being the Potchefstroom Hospital Casualty Unit upgrade in Dr. Kenneth Kaunda in Matlosana. And the last but not least being the Marcus Zenzile Clinic, again in Dr. Kenneth Kaunda in Matlosana, Chair. In table 2, Chair, we are now trying to paint a picture of a 3-year expenditure trend in each program, in each project, as well as the challenges and the key focus areas that the committee needs to look at as it undertake the site visits. In Mabato, Chair, where we have seen that in the 2023-24 budget allocation, the project spent more than 100%, and hence it's highlighted in red. It spent about 141.3% in that year. And in 2024-2025, out of 17 million, again, the project spent about 146.4%. In 2025-26, which is the current financial year, only 31% has been reported as per the National Treasury data out of the 10 million that has been allocated. The progress to date is between 76 to 99% construction. And what is quite concerning, Chair, the reason why we've highlighted this in red is that the expenditure management remains a challenge vis-a-vis the progress that is made on the ground. And the question is where did the 41.3% come from, the 46.4% come from, which is more than the 100% that was allocated for the project. And of course, there were some shifting of funds environment within the process. And what was the impact of those shifts in some of the programs where those monies were taken from? That's the oversight question that the committee can look at. The key challenges, Chair, in this program, we've highlighted the fact that there was termination of original professional service provider, which led to 6 months project stoppages. There was contract reappointment delays, which increased cost variances. And as a result, there's a risk of irregular expenditure in the project. There's payment delays to consultants and contractors, which violates the Section 38(1)(f) of the PFMA. And we know that that provision, Chair, make emphasis on the payment of invoices within 30 days of receipt. There's incomplete engineering design, which has delayed sewer, water, and roadworks. The way leave approval from municipality is still pending, and hence the blocking of completion. Now, what are the key focus areas for the committee during its oversight? Where Chair was saying the committee can investigate these cost overruns because clearly there's demonstration of overspending that we've highlighted in red, and also deadlines of completion being missed. The committee can also investigate, look at the proof of contract penalties or penalty clauses, how these penalty clauses have been implemented, where there is failure of delivery of performance or consequence management. And the committee can also look at how the PFMA compliance has been enforced, and also look at the full project closure out timeline. The second project being the Bopilo Psychiatric Hospital, Chair, we have highlighted the spending for 2 years in yellow, because as much as it's not 100%, but it's still less than 100% at 83.7% of 107.5 million in 23-24 financial year. The 2024-25 is 85.2. Again, it's not bad. Of 167.7 million. And the current financial year, which is 25-26 budget, there's only 10% that has been highlighted, that has been reported, of the 149.5 million. And the progress to date is between 26 and 50% of construction. Some of the key challenges, Chair, they've highlighted the issue of business forum disruptions, which has halted work 5 times in 2024 alone. There's been some payment delays caused, the contractor demobilization, disputes over quantities that has led to certificate disputes. There is also poor social facilitation, which leads to unmanageable community tensions. What are the key focus areas for the committee with regard to this project? The committee can look at how the contractor protection protocols have been enforced to address some of these issues, and investigate how the PFMA compliance failures have been dealt with. And also, last but not least, the committee can secure the risk mitigation plan for site security also. And the third project, which is now in Potchefstroom Hospital, in Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, the 2023-24 budget, there's an expenditure of 60% of 17.5 million rand, which is just above 50%, and hence it's in yellow. Yellow depicts the spending that is not 100%, but which is above 50%. Yes, Honorable Swart, the document was forwarded on Monday by colleagues. We can resend it to you, to your good self shortly after the meeting. In 2025, there was 22.5 million rand allocated. There was over expenditure of about 152.3%. In the current financial year, the 25 million that was allocated, there's 25.1% being spent, and the progress is remaining at between 76 and 99%. Some of the key issues that are highlighted there, it's outstanding construction drawing that has delayed the civil works. There is some scope creep without budget revision. There's hospital operational team that requested late designs also, and also there's delay in commissioning the project. These are just summaries of the issues that we thought we should bring forward to the attention of the committee, so to get a picture of what is it that is going to happen when members get into that particular project. Of course, yes, Chair, we'll certainly do that. Of course, the committee oversight focus in that specific project, Chair, will be to look at the approvals and design accountability, which has been a challenge. Will also be to investigate the possible fruitless expenditure, given that 152.3% expenditure. To also demand completion timelines, which is your project schedule. Next one. The last project, Chair, but not least, it's as Marcus Zenzile Clinic, which is under Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, again, Matlosana. The allocation in 23-24 was about 9.4 million, and 70.6% was spent in that particular year. Hence, it's in yellow. And 24-25 budget allocation was 10.5 million, and also they've overspent. 119.3% was spent, and in the current financial year, 9 million was allocated. To date, they've reported about 24% expenditure, and the construction progress is remaining at between 51 and 75%. Some of the key issues that are being highlighted in the project is that the project is already behind schedule. Since it was handed over in 22nd March 2022. There are some outstanding payments to the professional team that hinders access to critical project information. There is a slow progress by the contractor that contributes to the extended project duration and increased cost. Contractor is committed to attain practical completion by end of September 25, but without revised and realistic program of works, the project is at risk of not being completed. And Chair, the other issue is the community unrest and stoppage that have repeatedly disrupted site activities. It has impacted on timelines, and it has also further escalated the cost. Chair, there is also another issue where there is no clear, proper tracking as to who have benefited and how many people have benefited within the local communities from this same project. What are the key focus areas for the committee on this project, Chair? We're trying to summarize them quickly. The committee can look at the issues of project stoppage, which of course is one of the challenges. Look at how the conditions on DORA and the PFMA have been complied with and have been enforced. And lastly, secure a revised schedule or timeline of the project, because obviously where there are delays, there should be what we call a catch-up plan that the contractors and the department work on. Chair, there is cross-cutting risks that we've identified, of course, which are cutting across all projects. I'm not going to go through them. Members can read those in their own, but it's more or less the challenges, the risks that emanate from the challenges that we've highlighted. There are generic possible oversight questions, Chair, which we are also providing just to provide some focus on the line of questioning for members and on key issues that are cutting across. However, over and above these questions, Chair, would still provide what we call project-specific questions for all the 4 projects. When members, so that members can have specific questions when they are on site or when they interact with the department or the implementing agencies. And Chair, the outcomes of oversight, we're also saying, Chair, it's important to define the outcome of oversight in short and in summary. The committee should actually look at or receive what we call written project recovery plan within 14 days after the oversight from all the implementing agencies where there have been delay in implementation or deviation in implementation. There should be clear completion deadlines. There should be some monthly report that comes to SCOA as a follow-up on issues that were raised by the committee in that particular project, just to say this is how far we've gone to address some of these issues. And also Section 18 of the DORA of the Division of Revenue Act make a provision that National Treasury needs to intervene where repeated failures have not been addressed. Then also the final one, which is the consequence management report on some of the issues such as your penalty clauses that might not have been implemented, or such on the failures that may have been encountered through the contractors or otherwise. So these are some of the outcomes, Chair, that the committee would think when it comes back from that particular visit, it should actually achieve. On the conclusion, I just want to deal with the last part of the conclusion, Mr. Nodada, which is the urgent need that we are saying, Chair. There's an urgent need for faster design approvals and professional service management, better community and stakeholder facilitation to prevent site closures, stricter cost control and rollover environment oversights, alignment of project planning and budgeting to avoid cost overruns and underspending. So these are some of the issues that we think, Chair, are important to elevate in this report, but will form part of the recommendations, obviously, as we digest the information. We are also providing some proposed recommendation framework, having looked at all the challenges that are cross-cutting, and of course, this will be a work in progress. We will definitely update it as the new information comes on board. This, Chair, I must say that this is just aimed at painting a picture to members, as to say this is the kind of issues, these are the issues that they are going to have to look at during the oversight. But over and above this, there might be new information that comes on board, which we'll share with members in due course. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'll leave the program for Mr. Nodada to deal with it.
Colleagues, thank you very much. I don't think we will have much time for the program. All we know is that members of the Appropriations Committee will start their oversight on Wednesday and will do their oversight Wednesday and Thursday, colleagues. And Thursday, as we all know, that by 5 o'clock we must be in a virtual house sitting. We'll make sure that our project visits will end before lunch. After lunch, we sit for the debriefing with the departments on the 2 days visit to projects, where members will seek clarity on maybe questions that were not responded to and their dissatisfactions on what they have seen in the project. But that will be a program for less than 2 hours to allow members to go to their rooms at least 4 o'clock and be on time for the house sitting. I think we will be briefed through our WhatsApp group on any development that may arise between now and then, whether on logistical arrangement or the content or the visit itself to the oversight. I don't think members would want to ask any questions, as this is a Honorable Siwisa. I see your hand.
No, thank you, Chair. I just want to check because yesterday my network was very bad. And I'm not sure when is that, because remember, it's 2 committees with 2 different programs. When are we actually departing for Northwest? That's what I wanted to know, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, I'm just responding to your questions. The program, Mr. Nodada is supposed to be dealing with the program, but I did not want to hold you beyond the 12 o'clock, which was supposed to be the time for the end of our meeting. The application was made that members will depart their areas on Sunday and arrive in Mafikeng on Sunday, so that Monday, the Finance Committee can start with its business of oversight for Monday and Tuesday. When they are done, then Wednesday and Thursday will be 2 days of appropriations. Then on Friday, members will be flying back to their respective homes. I think that suffices, Honorable Siwisa.
Noted, Chair. Thank you very much.
Everything else, colleagues, will be communicated to your good selves through the WhatsApp and your individual emails. let me just take this time and thank all of you for allowing us to go beyond the 12 o'clock time that was set for the meeting. Honorable members, I really appreciate your working relationship, members of the staff, in supporting the work of the committee on a daily basis. This brings us to the end of our meeting. Colleagues, see you again in Mafikeng on Sunday. Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of our meeting.
Thank you, Chair.